All right. So we welcome the public to the Waunakee Community School District Co-Curricular Committee. It's my pleasure to call this Co-Curricular Committee meeting together. In attendance, we have Randy Gutenberg, Superintendent of Waunakee School District, Brian Borowski, High School Principal, Aaron May, Athletic Director, and BOE Co-Curricular Committee, David Betcher, Mark Hetzel, and myself. Can I get a motion to approve the current agenda?
So move.
Second. Dave will second that.
Second.
All right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any public comments? No public comments at this time. Very good. All right, we'll turn it over to Aaron May to begin to look at our handbook revision.
Sure, if you want to start with the acknowledgement statement. So at our last meeting back in November, one of the requests coming from this committee was some type of, we'll call it acknowledgement, receiving the coach's handbook and statement that you would abide by the regulations laid out in that handbook. So working with Mr. Borowski and Mr. Grabarski, this is the language that we've created. I think when it actually goes, I mean, if you guys are good with this language, we go to implement it, we'll probably do it as a Google survey out to the coaches. So that way it just auto populates and do a spreadsheet so we can use, so Jen and Sue can easily track who signed off and who hasn't signed off on it. So
does that go out with the handbook?
So that would be my plan. We would send it out with the handbook or with like the employment paperwork.
No, I think it's a good thing to add a level of protection.
If you want to go back, if you look at click on the subcommittee memo there. I don't know if the links are active or live in there. But one of the projects I'm working, Brian Grabarski kind of gave me the thumbs up on, calling it a handbook supplemental. It's basically going to be creating a website after the new websites are for our district are created. Talking with Stock Prairie and Oregon, they both kind of have these same things. They found it's more effective that way. Coaches don't go back to a PDF of a 25-page handbook. They'd much rather go to this and just look up the different forms, go to that tab and click what they need. So this is kind of what Stock Prairie's looks like. I'm going to be creating something along those lines. You can see Oregon's is very similar. Their different stuff is at the top.
Do you do anything? Can you do anything with this with, say, our changes to policy from what were the expectations for next year? So if there's a change to the handbook, there could be a section of changes.
Yep.
That they could click on and go
And they can see exactly. Yeah. Yes, we definitely could add that.
It's one of those that comes to the board every year. So
The handbook itself will go to the board every year. That, like I said, is just a supplemental piece.
Right.
But yeah.
But I'm just saying that
Yep.
it would be a way for coaches to be able to go through it, click on something,
Right.
just to see what we
Instead of going
changed.
through the whole thing. Right.
So we'll see this as coming through the handbook process this summer.
Yeah, along with co-curricular student handbook and the coach's handbook. The next piece is the sort of, it's called the interactive wall of fame. And if you want to click on the recognition one. So one of the good things, Waunakee High School, we've got a ton of great students and we've won a ton of great awards. On the other side, we are vastly, overwhelmingly out of space. So working with the coaching staffs, we've done a couple different things and kind of configured how we're going to do our trophy cases, the actual trophy cases in the high school. When you walk into the field house lobby, that's going to be for a category A sports championships and runner-up trophies on. What we lovingly refer to as the heritage trophy case is right along that. If you're walking in from the field house lobby and you're going to the old gym, that is everything from our capital conference years and prior. So that's our older stuff. And then the trophy cases in the commons area, those are all our Badger Conference trophies. And we're limiting what's getting displayed in those trophy cases to conference championship trophies. And other large event trophies like that. So we're no longer going to be putting up your third place, at the, Frank White cross country invitation. It's no offense to them. We just don't have the space.
So are you gonna archive?
So right
these?
now I've got about a dozen Rubbermaid bins full of trophies that we are still trying to figure out what we're going to do with those. They're sitting up in storage in the high school right now. So yeah, we're still trying to come up with a good solution. I've talked to some other ADs, and they've had some where they've auctioned them off. They've had some where they've given them away. Some have just chucked them. I don't want to do that. I'd rather have them sit in storage than do that.
Is there any way to link them to the students that were part of earning that trophy? Or don't we just have the records in order to get that far?
Right now, I would say that would be something that would be down the line. We would have to try and do a lot of digging to figure out who those people were.
I wonder how many booster clubs would want to do that. In other words, if we go to the booster club and say, this is one from the football team, would you guys be interested in tracking down who was on that team? Any of them that still live in Waunakee School District, would they be interested in deciding how they wanted it? If any of them wanted it who still lived within the district, and let the booster clubs handle part of that. It might be one way. I mean, the workload for us, I get it. The workload for you to do it would be overwhelming. But I'll bet the booster clubs might be willing to.
I'd hate to see it
No, right
moved
now,
out in total. I know at the UW when I've worked there, they have an archivist. Well, she has just many.
Yeah.
That's that she wears, but one of them is archiving, and so there are special events. She can get something from 1930.
Yeah.
I don't know that at the high school level we have those events, but in the same breath, if the decision is to get rid of them, then I really think we do need to contact some of the teams from those eras and say, what do you want?
yeah, we'll do something appropriate with them. Right now, we're putting them in storage until we can figure out what's an appropriate way.
Yep. There's a lot there though.
Yes, there is. Like I said, me and my boys over Christmas break filled up a dozen or so big Rubbermaid bins. One other thing we are doing, we worked with myself, John Kramer. We had Brian Adler, is that from fire department, come in. Yeah. So we're able to put some he looked at it, make sure we're within fire code. We're able to put trophies, cases in the hallway that goes from the commons to the field house. So right now we're working with actually trainer Matt does woodworking. He's going to build those for us. And so we're going to have some more trophy case space there. And then just the last piece on that part, we're going to have what we're calling the school year trophy. So we will have one trophy case where we will put up that school year's stuff. So gymnastics takes second place at the Mount Horeb Invite. That'll go up there for the school year. Our all-state kids that have their photos, that'll go in there. And then that photo will go back to those kids. We're not, right now we've scanned in all our photos, Kayla, and I'm kind of, sorry, moving on to the interactive part of it. We've scanned in all our photos. Kayla Proctor is working on photoshopping, improving the ones from the 70s, the 80s that have kind of faded. But we've created the interactive wall of fame. That was one of my goals for this year. The TV is ready. It's going to hopefully be mounted in the next week or so before Easter. But right now what we have in there on that interactive wall of fame, all state photos are all state athletes, our Hall of Fame coaches. And right now we're adding in team photos of our state championship teams. In the future, we'd ultimately like to include state runner-up teams, lists of our all conference athletes from each year, and then list of conference championship teams. Academic side of it, I have our WIA scholar athletes, their photos. The guidance office is working on getting me a list of all of our National Merit Scholar finalists. That'll be our first kind of academic recognition on there. And then we'll look at other ways to recognize our academic kids that excel in academics there. And then the performing arts, I've been working with Rick Braun, got me a list of all his one act performances that won the Critics' Choice Award. Reached out Molly Petroff and the rest of the music department about, is there some other, whether it's the solo ensemble state event or what's the recognition there, someone we can recognize our other performing arts. So that interactive wall of fame, the nice thing about it is basically the itself is just a touchscreen, interactive touchscreen, but it's a website, so it can be posted on our new web, our new website when that gets created, so people can look at it. But it's not bounded by this physical space like our trophy cases. So we don't have a bunch of photos kind of lined up and piled up on top of each other. Because we don't have a trophy space.
This is not going to be easy.
No.
We went through this at Edgewood College with limited space, and we did push down and get rid of all the invitational ones. We offered it to the coach if the coach didn't want them.
Yeah.
Then there was nothing else, and we stayed with championships and stuff. Katie and I were part of a high school that won many trophies and championships, and then when they come out to the parochial school, my stuff is in closets or boxes too. And I played with people like Kurt Warner that his stuff is up, my stuff is up. But it's not an easy thing, because again, I'll admit, my feelings were hurt for a couple of years that I couldn't show my kids things that I did in high school, but you have to make a choice.
So with the interactive wall of fame too, it'll be nice because those photos won't degrade over time. Like if you've looked, you'll see a few of them are gone. Well, actually all of them are pulled out because they're getting scanned in over spring break too. But then they're not, we've got a digital copy of it, and it's not going to degrade like that over time. And then in previous years, what we've done are all state athletes, when you get a Julie Fix, they take a photo of Julie Fix. The school gets a photo, the kids get a photo. Starting next year, the process will be, they'll still take the photo with Julia, but it'll just, instead of her creating two pictures or two photos for us, it'll be one for us. We'll frame it and everything. And at the end of that, and then it'll go in that school year trophy case. At the end of that year, then we would give it to, and I'll just use him because he came up today to let me know he's getting his photo taken. Like Andrew Keller's, you would just get it then, at the end of the school year for his family then to put up and to keep at home. So it's just a way to keep recognizing these kids while dealing with the realities of the limitations that we have.
Aaron, what are you doing with the it was a small one for the Hall of Fame coaches? Are they going to go into the state championship thing, or are they just going to be part of the virtual?
So they're in the interactive one. Chris is in there. We just took a photo from her. This is not a this year, next year thing. This is probably down the line. What I would like to do at some point in time, if you've been into Warrior Stadium, it's our largest facility. It's where most of our fans are. And on the west side of the press box, we have a single door that's for a storage closet. Then it's all sort of open space. I would like to, one, redo those plaques and put them there as it gets more and more, because right now the trophy case we have isn't even large enough for the coaches that we have in there.
Right.
So I either want to move it out there, or I do want to, I've considered moving it. At one point, that was going to be where we were going to put that interactive board, but we ended up not putting it there. That's something I've thought of, because it's between the fall and the spring seasons that gets the most foot traffic.
So that'd be when you come in the gate there, or?
Yeah, so when you would come into the gate and basically turn to get into the home bleachers, you would see it right there.
Yeah.
Like I said, that's an idea. That's a plan for discussion and thought out down the line, but not at this point.
And we have our share, don't we?
Yes, yes, and I believe, I have a feeling Spencer Lee will probably be added to that list at some point in the next year or so. So we have quite a few.
Right.
We can go to the youth girls.
You want the memo or you want the bottom?
I think we can go with the memo first, then we can just look at the numbers. So we have I've reached out to the youth girls hockey program, the Wildcats here in town, and the girls and the wrestling program for their numbers on how many girls they have. Because I want to start tracking as these sports grow or potentially grow. There may come a time where, especially if it's our Cap City Cougars co-op, where it no longer becomes advantageous for us to be part of that co-op, and may have to just investigate breaking off and being a standalone program. There are not many girls hockey standalone programs in the state. If you look at our numbers, we have some pretty decent numbers. If you just take that 4-year chunk from 5th to 8th grade, you're looking at almost 40 girls there. Now, there's going to be some attrition and things like that. We don't know how many are actually going to make it through high school, but that's a pretty decent amount of students to start looking at having your own program. So it's something I definitely want to start tracking more closely, because to make that move from the co-op, right now for the co-op, we pay a per student fee to Sun Prairie as they run the co-op. But if we're going to move something and take it on as ourselves, that's going to be we're going to have to take on a lot more, 100% of the transportation, coaches' salaries, those type of things. So it's definitely going to be something that, when it happens, is going to have some significant budgetary impacts. On the girls wrestling side, girls wrestling is growing fairly quickly. WIA just started, sorry, I'm blanking on the phrase, what they call it, they gave it like an emerging status. So is the NCAA, it's emerging sport at the NCAA level. So they held their first ever girls state tournament this year at the lacrosse center. If you look, our numbers are kind of all, they're low, fairly low, but they're spread out over those 8 years. This year we had 2 female wrestlers on the team. So they participated in a combination of both what we call standard wrestling events and then some girls only or girl specific wrestling events. They both competed at the state tournament. And they're one's a freshman, one's a sophomore. So hopefully they're around for a few more years too. So this is just sort of an informational thing that these are numbers we're going to be tracking and keeping an eye on, and hopefully we'll be proactive about expanding our opportunities for female athletes if and when the numbers dictate it.
Randy, how do you see that working? I mean, obviously I don't think we'd want to drop a girls hockey program, on a year before without some planning. At what point do you start putting a budget together? Or
It's a good question. I think right now the co-op has been pretty active as far as those pieces. I think right now we're going to see some things that are coming forward. I know that Steve Summers, myself, Aaron, and others have had conversations just about ice time. So I think that's kind of the emerging question. And I think when that comes forward, that's going to watch things kind of when duties numbers hit the point that we do it. That's boys and girls is a nice kind of issue across the board, but I think it's a piece we've got to have some conversations to start there and reach out to and talk to see where the kids are at this point. But we've got to be able to, in order to pull together a team, if we were going to have a girls team, right now there is one team. Is there a JV varsity or is it just varsity? At the
Cap City Cougars, we have a JV and a varsity, right. But that's a co-op made of, I think, 5 total schools.
That's huge.
Yeah, so it's now the majority of those girls are Waunakee and Sun Prairie. Fall up west, the Forest is just 1 or 2 from each of them.
But like a dozen kids at the high school.
Yeah.
Is that about what I remember?
Yeah.
So if we're 9 to 12, about a dozen kids that play hockey for the.
do we think that we had a team, we would have less drop off? There would be more girls looking forward to playing for their Waunakee high school hockey team.
Potentially, I think what we also have, because we would potentially have student athletes too, girls hockey, we have girls that participate in the club level at the high school age and don't come out for the team, for the high school sponsored team.
How many?
That's
players
that's how many, I don't have a number.
No, how many players do the guys carry? And do they have a JV varsity or is it not a 9 through 12 varsity?
The boys have, flip to the participation numbers. Boys, we had 43 hockey players out this year, so we keep about 20 on each level. We have a few kids double rostered.
Getting close to that. I think that's a conversation that's something probably to have.
Because there's gonna, yeah, and one of the hard conversations there is, can we break off and we're a standalone program? Do we start with a JV and a varsity program? Do we start as just a JV and move forward? Because if you're a senior student and the year before you're on the Cap City Cougars, which is a very competitive team in the girls in the league, and then all of a sudden we're deciding to move over and now it's our 4 grades only. We're trying to create a varsity team. I don't know if that's, what kind of experience that's going to be. So in terms of competitive season for your senior year, I don't know how.
Well, again,
Well, then that has to go in the decision.
Yeah.
Looking at, okay, you've got, say, 12 in the capital program,
Yeah.
are all 12 varsity players.
Yeah.
And if they're not, that might dictate the decision, how you enter this thing.
So it's just right now, like I said, we're just starting to track these numbers. And something to just,
Aaron, do the girls practice at different sites because of the co-op, like here in Sun Prairie, or how does that work?
almost nearly all of the practices are in Sun Prairie.
Okay.
One, a handful of times they'll be over here just because of ice availability.
Yeah.
The games, they are split fairly evenly between Sun Prairie and Waunakee.
That's what we have to watch, and that's part of the reason we brought it forward, is kind of our some emerging programs that are bringing in more participation.
And yeah, so it's just something to keep an eye on as we move forward. Want to go to the memo first? So there's realignment in 2 areas here. If you remember back in November, the discussion was, or the proposal at that time was for Monroe and Waunakee to leave the Badger. Monroe would go to the Rock Valley, Waunakee would go to the Big 8, and the 2 Sun Prairie schools would take our place in the Badger. The WIA ultimately made some amendments or some changes. Monroe is still exiting. McFarland is coming in and taking their place. We are staying in the Badger for now. This is actually going to the WIA at the end of April. I think it's April 27th, the last Wednesday in April, for approval at their Board of Control meeting then. With that pending addition of McFarland, the conference athletic directors are revisiting how our conference is aligned itself. And there was, if you look through the documents, there's a PowerPoint kind of laying out the different options, but it was basically an east-west, which is kind of what we're in now, and north-south, which was the old conference alignment. This east-west pods thing where you're in groups of 4, then finally a large-small. I surveyed our coaching staff, what their preferences were. Large-small was the overwhelming choice from our head coaches. We have some coaches that would welcome the discussion about whether or not we do stay in the Badger. If we continue to grow, I think there might be a point where we have to have that conversation, but that's not, I'm going to speak for Brian, but I think you'll agree with me, that's not something we want to do at this point. But if our growth continues the way it is at the high school, it's just going to become inevitable. But I think a large-small would go a long ways to push off any any change that drastic.
Looking at the numbers, we would be have the most enrollment, be the
Yeah.
largest school.
Yep, yeah, we're the largest school. If you look at the football only conference, you know, Sun Prairie claims they'll be smaller than us, at least for that first year, but we'll see. So this is the what I shared with the head coaches. I think I shared it with Randy and Brian too.
Is there anything you want to pull up in this PowerPoint?
If you want to go down, you know, if you want to go back up to the unhappy, I think it says unhappy at the top. Yeah. With this pod formation that they created, there's no consistent scheduling format, identifying champions in different sports. It is, I'll just speak freely here. I was not in favor of it when it got approved. And what we've seen is it has become a bit of an administrative hassle, well, more than hassle, nightmare for the athletic directors that have to run it. Because I honestly had to sit, you know, Marcus and I just had to sit down and read through the bylaws to figure out exactly who are we playing, which games count towards the conference championship, which ones don't. Because in our pod, we play our pod twice, but then you play the adjacent pod once and then the neighboring pod once. And so it was really odd about trying to figure out how your conference was determined. And so, I mean, Marcus and I sat down and read it like 3 or 4 times trying to figure that out. And one of the things we lived this fall, DeForest lost 1 game and tied 1 game in conference. And they officially finished in 3rd place with no opportunity to win the championship because our pot of 4, Waunakee, DeForest, Watertown, Beaver Dam, the team with the best record plays the team in the other pot of 4, which is Fort Atkinson, Stoughton, Milton, and Monona Grove for the championship. So our number 1 plays that other group's number 1. Monona Grove was a 500 team. Both Waunakee and DeForest beat Monona Grove in the soccer season that year. But Monona Grove officially took 2nd in conference because they played us in that championship game. Meanwhile, DeForest had 1 loss, 1 tie in conference, and the best they could do was place 3rd. And we're like, that just does not seem, when you sit down and go, okay, identify the top teams of the conference, it was Waunakee and DeForest. Yet DeForest, because of that, you know, because of how that worked out, didn't, because they had tied 1 game and then lost to us, who split with them. They couldn't even, they wouldn't have had an opportunity to play for 1st place.
Where did it come from? Because it seemed like the darndest thing to me as a former coach. What was wrong with the conference alignments and that's, you know, how we do it?
So a lot of this came when I first got here. I think when Watertown Beaver Dam came in, that should have been the time to make the move. Originally, the directive coming from the principals at the time was there was a push from some of our smaller schools to review 1, enrollment sizes, 2, geography, and then 3, because of geography, the loss of academic time. How can we minimize the discrepancy in enrollment? How can we minimize the travel time? How can we minimize loss of academic time due to events? When this proposal came out, I was pretty vocal among the ADs being against it. Thought it was unnecessarily complicated and complicated just for the sake of being complicated.
So Aaron, when you look at this presentation, they say use the we. Who's the we?
I would say there is an overwhelming. I would say the majority of athletic directors are unsatisfied with how this is actually working in practice.
Okay, so this is kind of this presentation.
This was for the ADs. Yep.
Thank you. I just want to clarify. The we is not us. The we is bigger.
Is many of the, and it was not. I think, Mark, if I go back and it was approved by a simple majority. if I could go back in time to that time, I would have asked that it be 2/3 or something like, because there was not enough consensus around one plan, that any plan I think we would have chosen would have met with the same amount of resistance. Because there was, it was, so many different factions at that time. I personally, I think this is probably with how the Badger Conference is currently set up. This would be the best situation for us as a school, but also the best situation for all of the schools involved. With a large, small format, the thought process right now would be every 4 years, you would review enrollment and use the numbers you submit to the WIA to reconstitute or potentially refigure who's in the large and small. That is going to be a discussion point. That's going to be at the April meeting, which is going to be is a joint one with the principals and superintendents.
So if you had this format with this past year's records, would the Forest have been able to play for the championship?
So basically our game would have become the de facto championship game with them. But when you have a conference, see right now with the way the format's set up, we have an actual game that's listed. This is the conference championship game. If we would go to this format, we wouldn't have that game. But when you say we're going to have a conference championship and the team, Winona Grove, that was in the championship game, was clearly inferior to the other team. It just didn't sit right.
So there would be no per se conference championship game.
No.
So
we go back to the standard, just what's your record?
So in this format with the large and small, those would be the teams you'd be playing.
Yep.
But whoever had the best record overall would be the champion,
Yep.
no matter where you were.
Yep.
And it wouldn't be that final game.
Yep. Because as is the way it was set up now, we're playing Winona Grove, who basically had a 500 conference record. If they would have beaten us in that game, that would have been our first loss in conference. We would not have been conference champs.
So for some of the sports, you've had crossover games. Would this eliminate that?
Right now, well, I can't really speak to that at this point. I think if we were in a large, small, I think crossovers would no longer be automatically scheduled. That would be up to schools.
Right.
But that hasn't been finalized. I think, when you look at some of these groups, like Oregon Stoughton would probably continue to play each other. Is this going to eliminate us playing Portage? Yes. Do both sides probably be happy with that? Yes, I think we both would. Okay. But we would still, more than likely still be scheduling Edgewood and things like golf, boys basketball, things like that. Look at the reporting forms or guidelines. Let's start with the guidelines is policy, so there's not much to discuss there. It's just a sign off. You want to go there. So every spring we do, we require the booster clubs to submit just their own financial report to us. It's on a spreadsheet that they submitted to, where we ask for really hold up my sheet here. There you go. A standard, just some major broad stroke categories of revenues and expenses for all of our different sports. So
this was simplified from a few years ago, and it was brought through this committee of what information was important. So that's, I think, where this started. Is that correct?
Yeah, this would have been 2017-18 school year. I think is the first year we moved to this form, and that was from this group. Because the old way each group would send a page in, it was not always the easiest thing to.
So the question I have, and I had it before when I was previous on the committee about 1,000 years ago, whenever it was. This looks great and it's simple, but since they're connected with our school district. And what they do is under WIA regulations. Where do we see expenses versus revenues and accountability for it? I mean, some of these budgets, when I was on in the past, are over 25 grand. And I know in the state of Wisconsin, there's not a single budget that's 25 grand that doesn't get itemized accounting. And so how do we, where does that come from? And because the oversight that I think we need to have to avoid embarrassments and integrity issues that could happen in any given year. I mean, it doesn't happen often, but like when the
Happened in Stoughton, the rest of them.
the baseball program in Sun Prairie, the summer program, I forget what it was called, but about 4 years ago, embezzlement things. And you know, how do we oversee that? That's my question.
So that's talking about money. That is $1 million question. Districts handle it different ways. You know, we have some of these programs are 501c3, so they're doing their accounting. Some of them are not. You know, there's some groups like the dance, gymnastics, few others that actually run through use us as their, I'll call it a bank. And so we have their oversight that way. And then we do still have some of the old fashioned checkbook ones, which are the ones we need to bring into the fold for sure.
No, I agree, I would agree with you, Mark. I think, I mean, the questions would be, they fill this out, who's auditing what they're doing? I've looked at some of these reports too, and I'm like, you know, I'm not sure if the numbers are adding up, right? You know, and that's the difference of not knowing how they're all set up. And this also brings into, you know, what we have brought up before in terms of tracking and Title IX and equality and stuff like that. How, because again, they can raise as much money as they want, but
Right.
as soon as they give it to us,
And
now it's on
ours.
our books,
Yep.
and that becomes an issue. So I think that's something that we still need to work on.
Yeah.
And we're not trying to hold back anybody from getting it or anything
No.
like that, but we're trying to save, protect ourselves.
And
Protect the
them,
booster clubs,
you know, who's
and then
ever in charge of the booster club, they have a lot of liability,
Right,
and I think it protects everybody.
but then also make sure that we're providing fair opportunities.
Yes.
Well, and we have booster clubs on that list. We've had this discussion too, where, you know, they are the booster club, but they're also the youth club, and they're also,
Right.
you know, so their dollars coming in sometimes looks like they've got a lot of dollars coming in, but a lot are turning around going out because they're using it to support basically the K-8 programs that otherwise wouldn't exist without it. So, yeah, that is.
And I think some people do a good job of tracking that, but for some of them that are doing that, that's great, but we should see it.
Yeah, I think the reason you're bringing this here, Aaron, is to try to get a sense of what the committee's looking for from an accountability piece of the plan.
Right.
And we've gone all over the map of it since in the last since I've been here. We've kind of gone from an individualized report, which was this kind of in a different format, tied in with enrollment numbers, etc. We went to the point where we had a pretty detailed one that was trying to break out, like you were saying, it started to try to itemize down, and it just didn't delineate down far enough.
Right.
And I think that then it would bring up questions on the board. And then I think this item came up a couple of years ago, Eric.
Yeah.
Where the committee was like, well, these are the things that we're concerned about. I mean, I think there's probably, we have ones with checkbooks, we've got to bring those into the fold. We've tried to get rid of those as much as possible and bring them into the school district, because that's where we can bring those dollars in and make it much more. Those are audited pieces by our auditors and they follow auditors. If there's any of those out there, we need to work together to get those in. The 501c3, so those larger ones, they definitely, they have their own accounting pieces that we have to look for. It's kind of how much information do we want as a district as we go forward. And to be honest, we've done kind of on both sides of one kind of a high level piece here that hits things that are of importance, all the way to the point of wanting to granular down to more specifics. So I guess that's part of, I think, why you're bringing this here, Aaron, is before we get to that point, kind of at the end of the year here, to make sure that we're asking for what we really want to have. And if there's a piece where we need to seek some other advice on this, because I think we've ebbed and flowed through this with the committee's discussions. And I'm open to that as well. We could ask the auditors, we could ask some others, kind of what would be recommendations on how we best manage some of the accountability of these, particularly since it does impact our budget.
Yeah, I just want the clubs that aren't in the system for, in our accounting system, that they truly understand what they can and can't do. And I don't know if that's reviewed every year, if you have a returning leadership, you've got that, but long before Randy was here, I can remember a team that went to state, and the coach just was super excited and gave out of their own pocket special gifts for doing it, and they all had to be collected. And so it was correctable, but there was a lot of money spent that shouldn't have been. And I just don't want either the club or the kid to suffer because of that. And somehow that's what's important, that we're following the rules. And I don't know what we can do in terms of oversight, but that to me seems to be a really blurry area right now.
And I think some of the things we did a few years ago, we kind of rewrote the policy in booster club relations. And I think part of this also has to make sure that everybody's aware of what some of the things we talk about, gifts and having a staff, etc.
Right.
But there's an acknowledgement of that, and then there's a sign-off piece of it. So that's a piece that was implemented here in 2018. We kind of brought that piece forward, and I think that's been in place. And that was directly to that point. But I think the piece that continues to come up is the financial accountability of really groups that the ballpark you're looking at $250,000 a year plus that are used for our students. Some of them are things like food and such between games that are kind of brought forth there, but other things are definitely direct donations to us, equipment, uniforms, gear that the kids get, spirit packs, all of those type of things that definitely benefit our students and have an impact there. But
And we couldn't do without the clubs.
right, so there's that piece of it. So this kind of hits the guidelines that we talked about. I think that's a piece that Aaron is implementing. But when we get back to kind of that reporting form, it's really a matter of kind of from a financial standpoint, because this is really where the conversations have taken place over the years. What do we want for kind of these reports from the forward? Some of them are pretty basic. Some of these are not real big accounts, and others are significant, as you pointed out.
But I've heard before some of the significant ones that have their own accountants, that they would be free to come in and share. So, yeah, I mean, I think it's the consistency that if we don't start something, I mean, if we don't start something, at what point could it go the wrong way? Or could we be called on the carpet about something? And for us to just say, well, we collected information on these 4 categories, the rest of it, and if we're getting funds from them, then we're sort of partly responsible for where that money came from.
And to that end, too, one of the things new this year, and I haven't shared with the booster clubs yet, is I am going to be requesting their bylaws. And a good set of bylaws should have in there a part about the treasurer, how expenditures are made. I can just speak from personal experience from going to a handful of the rest of the backers meetings. They have, they do an accounting, do a rectification of any dollars spent, whether it's for the youth program or for the high school program for Mark. But so that's going to be a new piece that I am going to be requesting, because it came up in a conversation with with some parents who were trying to kind of get the, they were taking over and looking at it going, we don't have, and then I asked, well, what do your bylaws say? They're like, we don't really have operating bylaws. I said, well, that I think needs to be first step. So I think one way to help, I can help those
Right.
groups out is, okay, let's collect all those in. And now I can have those as a resource. So if just gonna, ski and snowboard, which is not up there, which is looking to create a booster club. Like, well, here's basically an outline or a template for your bylaws. And you can start identifying, start doing these things the right way. So you can start off, and then we can start sharing those things out. And we can start looking at, okay, what is your actual financial management? What does it say in there? If it doesn't say it, what do we need to add in?
So again, it's kind of ironic with the amount of effort we put into the double checks and triple checks or gate receipts and that sort of thing, that a number of these, and it may be only one, it may be none, but I know from when we started these things, it was mom and pop. One person had the checkbook and they wrote the checks and it was all good, but how do you double check that? And I think if that were in the bylaws, that'd be a good start.
Yeah, and then to try and crowdsource some of the stuff I did, sent out just some, asking some of our other Badger conference and some of the other Big 8 schools, all the way over to your Cedarburgs, Hartfords, those schools. And do you have anything like, booster club bylaws, booster club best practices that you share with? Because that's one of the other things we get, and Katie's here, and she's been on a couple different booster clubs, is when the turnover happens, sometimes there's a lot of reteaching. So I'm like, if we can create some kind of best practices document where when a new, executive board takes over, they're not all starting from just, well, here's the big binder that they handed me about how to run a concession stand, but how do I actually work with the athletic department to get different things ordered or things like that? So,
right.
Do you have a document that you would sort of follow or something?
So
you might be able to put together this summer. Or
that's on the future goals plan, because the resounding response from the other ADs was no, we have nothing. And I was like, okay, so hopefully I can create something and share that out with other people. But right now I don't want to. One of those things, and this will a goal for next school year would be to start working with some of the more established booster clubs about creating some of that stuff, because there's a lot of them already have it, and then it's just about sharing across the different sports.
Yep.
But this summer, this is when this report comes. It's usually this summer between the end of the school year and the beginning of next school year. I mean, there's a couple options, and obviously, Aaron, this has been a piece that's come to the committee in the past. So this is a piece that you can move forward with. The other piece I would offer is, and I can work with Steve and Aaron through summers, and we can think about kind of how do we make this. We can work with some of our other financial advisors and kind of see what would be kind of our best practice for tracking some of these, and kind of bring that information forward so that you have those aspects. So I mean, I guess what I'm hearing a little bit is that there's a little concern this might be a little vague. We'd like some more information. We've been down that road, but I think if we can standardize it to a point where.
Well, it's not making a mountain for the clubs to bring to us.
And that's part of the piece, but maybe you and I can work with Steve and just talk through that. And that may at least give us something that would, I think, address at least some of the questions that you brought up.
Weren't some of the non-athletic clubs running booster clubs and had financials that aren't on this list? Such as, I know there was one for
Forensics, music has one.
Music has one.
Those have just traditionally not been requested for review. If we want to start adding those in, we can.
I think we have to. I mean, if there's a booster club running, collecting money and spending it, whether it's athletics or
Any
non-athletics.
club, for sure.
Exactly.
And we can add this, and since we made that shift with kind of the class A participation. We can have that.
you know, it might be something that they're tracking from year to year. But in terms of presentation to a board, it could be every 3 years as a check and
Yeah.
to make sure that, but they would have to show the previous.
Well, we as a board need to know there's a reasonable system for doing it. We don't have to see that every year. It's, you know, it's fine to have it, but I would agree, if we had a report every 2 years, every 3 years, as long as the system's in, that's being done, you know, that, to me, that's the important thing.
Well, I think the booster clubs though should report to the school every year.
Yeah.
Possibly you may say that the co-curricular committee isn't gonna look at those reports, but
Right,
every other year.
but someone in the school should see them.
But they should still have to turn them in every single year because a lot of those clubs change people.
Yep.
Just about that fast.
I mean, my take is if we're gonna collect the information, we should bring it here, because there's always questions.
I agree.
So to me, on an annual basis, having it come here makes the most sense. So if you're comfortable with that, Aaron, you might even then sit down with Steve, we can look at kind of how we've done this in the past over the years. It's kind of ebb and flow, this was the most recent iteration.
Then the other one is, we can go back to the agenda.
I'm sorry, can I just ask one more point about, this just theoretically, I know there are disparities between one group and another group, even, I mean, just in capability of generating resources. Are there any Title IX issues we need to be concerned with moving forward about that disparity?
Another piece that when we do our Title IX, we'll do that.
Okay.
Potentially, yeah. I mean, I think some of the things we're talking about with booster clubs and Title IX, absolutely, that's a big piece that, I think that's why we want to get a kind of a professional review.
Well, I think it's something we should be ahead of instead of behind it too, so, yeah.
Yeah, and I think that process will get us ahead of it, so
Okay,
we can identify, and if not, whether it's booster clubs, whether it's something else, we can identify, okay, here's what it is, and then, okay, what's our plan to address that?
right.
So then if we do have someone come to us and say, we understand that that's a shortcoming, here's our plan over the next amount of time to actually rectify that situation. Good.
Anything else you have with that here?
No, that would be it. I don't know if you want to look at the participation academics, that's just again, a straight, just a table. Our participation numbers, again, really strong across the board. You can see there, we were talking about girls hockey. We have currently 13 girls hockey players in the high school. But otherwise, our numbers are all fairly strong for winter sports. Girls basketball, boys basketball, really strong. And then our GPAs also very strong.
Just one question about, go back to the girls hockey.
Yep.
Would that number have to be like 20?
I would want it to be at 20 before I
Yeah.
think we would, so
Right.
that, then I think we would feel comfortable where we're not all of a sudden having to drop games because one or two girls, hockey is one of the higher incidents in terms of injury rates. So it's definitely something where you want to have numbers.
Okay.
I think the hardest part about that too is going to be watching as you're going into it. If 2 years later, 3 years later, you start dropping down, you can't jump back to, sharing with other teams. That's
Would be awfully difficult.
yeah. So if you're saying your minimum number is 20 just to operate, then probably your minimum number
Too
for
small.
sustainability is
Right.
26, 28, 30.
Right.
Otherwise, you're going to hit a down year and now you're in trouble.
That's a good point.
And then middle school sports side, again, boys basketball's really strong. Girls basketball at the middle school level has always been, or I should say always, it's recently been a struggle. Something that I'm trying to get our numbers up there because it offers a different opportunity than what the BDL league or the swing leagues do. Wrestling program has always hovered around that mid-30s at the middle school level. Our middle school sports are 7th and 8th grade only. We don't offer up to 6th grade, but the conference we participate in does. And if your middle school is a 6th through 8th building.
How did the basketball go with BDL simultaneously? with our change?
Well, we didn't have any conflicts there. We only had a handful of girls take advantage of it this year. We'll see how that goes moving forward. GPAs, again, just as strong as always. I think should be taken as a fact that just, the more you participate, the stronger your grades are. That's the entire chart there. We can move on from that one. The last one is the club updates.
Do we ever run co-curricular grade GPAs on other?
No, I've only ever done it on our
athletic?
yeah. I would have to go to Becky.
You don't have to. I just was wondering.
Yeah, well, and I can't say I've actually done it, but Becky Castle set it up all for me. She has a nice little chart that shows me step by step how to do it in a campus. Some club updates here.
If I can give a little preamble,
Yeah.
because this is something we've got to clean up. Just to be honest, because it's a matter of where we have club requests, I think by policy that are coming in the fall. They've always been set up that way. It's a bit of a, I've heard different feedback from board members over time with regards to it, because it comes before you ever really hit your budget cycle. And that's when you take a look at like a new club coming in, but obviously many of those come in, or most of them come in without any pay to them. And then as they establish themselves, it's in the fall when you review, like, are they now eligible? So you're seeing things tonight that we just got to tighten up as far as making sure people are submitting things on the correct time frame and making sure that things are coming at a point where we want them kind of from a budgetary standpoint. So some of this was a little bit by design, some of this was things getting caught up. A few of the things you'll see here tonight are for the 22-23 school year. I think that lines up well budgetarily. That's why those were brought here. Some of these came in after we had, or actually the day of our last co-curricular meeting, and we didn't put them on the agenda. So they didn't come in timely, so we're bringing them at a future meeting. But I know that Rebecca's been working on this with folks in the HR office, and we'll work with the high school as well to make sure that this gets lined up a little tighter so that this doesn't continue to happen. So that's kind of where we're at. So with that, I'll turn it back to you.
Yeah, so the first one, the first group there is, these are just additions. These are new clubs. At this time aren't being really, would be like any of our new clubs that we offer where we're just starting it out. So we have Teens Against Trafficking, Women's Issues Club, Future Educators Club, and then the FFA Trap Shooting Club. So I would, if we want to talk about what each club is, or however you want to bring those up.
They're relatively straightforward with the information. Was that in here?
It's under each club then, so I just put this whole memo.
Sure.
Yeah, you did.
Yeah, so if you want us to pull anything up, we can. I think some of these have been in place. I think the trafficking, the women's issues, the educators club.
Future Educators Club just got started. That was a request because of the teacher shortage that we're facing. And I said, yeah, let's just go ahead, and if we can get it going, let's make it happen.
My son signed up for it. I didn't even know he wanted to be a teacher.
And the trap shooting club came this winter because there's some kids that have seen other area schools that have had it, and they brought that through the side.
Fall under the umbrella of FFA.
Under the umbrella of FFA. So these are pieces that we're recommending that we don't have a pay component to them. We're recommending them to be approved.
I move we accept the new clubs.
I just had one quick question, and maybe I'm not seeing it here properly. But most of the clubs had a list of students who, want to be club to show its viability. Was there one for the trap club?
That would still be the FFA members. So
So that's the full, I was just surprised. It's like,
it would be a branch off of that. So kids who are in FFA that want to be part of the trap shooting club would do it.
what about
This is in the
students who want to be in
non-FFA too?
trap shooting who aren't in the FFA?
And I mean,
to-
we weren't even sure that this would
Really?
fly, so.
Right, no, yeah.
We didn't know how you guys would feel about.
Because
trap
those
shooting.
traps may not go high enough, or
Uh,
why is it
so-
gonna fly?
I
I think it's a legitimate sport, skill.
No, it's,
A lot of guys are in trap clubs at, in older age and stuff.
I did it and I'm horrible at it, but hopefully they'll do better. But I'm just wondering why we're limiting it to FFA students.
Well, we weren't sure it was gonna go through this process, so we weren't sure if they'd get hung up. I think that if we asked Alyssa that she would be able to get a list of kids who are interested.
Yeah, I think it came out of the FFA membership. I think.
Yeah.
I thought there was actually, when I first looked at it, I thought there was a list of kids or a number of
There
kids.
there was a list, but it was a list of the coaches in the area.
Oh, that's what
Right.
it was.
Right.
So
I
then you
looked at
showed
that
the other
multiple
districts that have it, but I know that there was an interest from the FFA kids, brought it to us. So, I mean, I'm assuming that if this was something that moved forward, should be open to other kids who weren't. Every kid who takes an ag class, even if you take one ag class, you're automatically. in FFA. So that's kind of how FFA works.
I would, the only thing I would ask is that that club not be listed as FFA trap shooting,
Right.
just the trap
Trap
shooting.
shooting
club.
club.
That it's open to anybody who wants to participate, just like any other sport or anything else.
That's something I need clarification on, because if they were competing against other FFA schools. that would
Or
just
was
be-
there a requirement on that?
That, I don't know. I know the handful of schools that she reached out to, I think that's where it falls under is their FFA.
I mean, if it's an eligibility thing, just like any WIAA rule, yeah, we have to follow it. But if it's not, then any student that's eligible to participate in it should be allowed to participate in it. How's that sound?
Well, if you look there, yeah, it is a team under the club organization. Yes, it's in the FFA.
So it follows under the FFA code of conduct, yeah.
So what do you have to do to be part of FFA?
Take a class at the high school.
You have to take the class, so you can't just sign up and join trap shooting.
I think you have to take a class.
No, I think.
Well, hold it, it's saying if there's no agriculture department at a school district, then you can participate?
Many schools don't have the same level of FFA and ag department that we have. They've done a great job building that. I am sorry that I have another meeting at 6 o'clock. and I'm-
What I'd recommend is that if you're okay with the concept of the capture group, I'd approve it with the question that we have to bring back and then Aaron and Brian can go talk to this at the council before the board.
That's good.
Yeah.
With that caveat.
I mean, I don't think, I personally don't have a problem with it. I think it's cool, but yeah, I just want it to be as open as possible.
So you second me?
Sure, second.
All in favor, say aye.
All right.
Aye.
All right, so that's for those items. The other ones were with regards to paid positions, is that correct, Aaron?
Yeah, so.
I can do this. So this is, whenever a program is approved, for example, we're just looking at these that you're just approved, the board approves, and there's actually a request in there that says, are you gonna request pay after you've established it for 3 years? The concept of that being in place was so that you didn't have a club that just joined for 1 year, you all have some associated pay with it, and now it dissipates. So you have to show sustainability to it. So there are ones here tonight that are hitting that level, and we're bringing them forward. The Civics Game Club began in 1819. The Mental Wellness Club and Young Conservatives Club, I believe that one started in 1617. So I think, Rebecca, I know you've been working with the HR department on this. So the civics game one would be for next year for 22-23, but the other one here, the mental wellness and conservatives club, started in 16-17. So that should actually be approved for the current year that we're in. So there are numbers, they are sustainable, they are.
Yeah.
I was actually happy to see the mental wellness club has actually been growing over the years.
Yeah.
And then how we lined them up, just in terms of the pay rate, the Civics Games Club, there's a competition part tied to that, similar to mock trial. So that's why we lined it up the same rate as mock trial, whereas The other two are more just straight up service clubs, so we line that up with those groups there, so that's where there's the differences in pay rates.
This is the recommendation from the committee to the board.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
I,
That's it.
I would like to bring up, I believe that when we've done the winter sports and stuff reports about number of kids and all this stuff, we also had the winter non-sports. We're also reported at that time, like the forensics and all the other ones, but we didn't have that this time.
Nope.
So we can bring that forward. Yeah.
Need to make another meeting anytime soon?
Why don't you just wait for right now?
to reorganization.
Yeah, wait till the reorganization, then we'll kind of see where we're at.
Okay.
But I mean, I think Julie noted, Dave, about the non-sports participation. Pieces we're looking at.
Yeah, I think there'll be other people. All right,
Motion to adjourn.
So move.
Second.
all right. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you, everyone.
All right, have a good night.
You have a minute, Randy? Sure.